In a small village, nestled at the foot of a majestic mountain range, there lived a woman named Sarah. She was known for her beauty, wisdom, and her mysterious garden, which was surrounded by its all-stone walls that no one was allowed to enter. The villagers were always curious about what was inside the garden, but despite their efforts, no one could ever see anything. It was said that the garden was cursed, and whoever entered it would never return. Sarah was a solitary figure, preferring to spend most of her time in her garden, where she would spend hours tending to the flowers and plants. Despite her reclusive nature, the villagers respected her and her knowledge of the natural world, and would often seek her advice on various matters. However, her garden remained a mystery to all, and the villagers would often tell tales to one another about what might be inside. Some said that it was a garden of magical plants, while others claimed that it was home to an evil spirit that would curse anyone who entered. Despite these rumors, no one could ever say for certain what was inside Sarah's garden, and the mystery only added to its allure. One day, a young man named Jack, who was traveling through the village, heard about Sarah's mysterious garden. Despite the warnings from the villagers, Jack's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to see for himself what was inside the garden. Being an adventurous young man, Jack was not easily discouraged. He had been on many journeys and had faced many challenges, but he had always emerged victorious. So, he was determined to find out what was inside Sarah's garden, even if it meant going against the wishes of the villagers. The day was bright and sunny as Jack approached the walls of the garden. He looked up and saw the towering stone walls that surrounded it, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. He peered over the top of the wall, but all he could see were the tops of trees and the occasional flash of color from a flower. He approached the gate and tried to open it, but it was locked. He looked around and saw a small window in the wall, so he decided to climb up and take a look inside. As he peered through the window, he was amazed at what he saw. The garden was a lush and verdant paradise, filled with exotic plants, blooming flowers, and flitting butterflies. Despite the warnings from the villagers, Jack was determined to see more. So, he found a way to climb over the wall and enter the garden. As he walked deeper into the garden, he felt a sense of wonder and awe. He marveled at the beauty of the plants and the peacefulness of the garden. Despite its reputation as a cursed place, he felt safe and at peace, as if he had found a hidden haven. The villagers were shocked to see Jack enter the garden and immediately ran to warn him of the dangers that lay within. They told him that no one who had ever entered the garden had ever returned, and that the garden was cursed. They begged Jack to leave and promised to reward him if he did so, but Jack was stubborn and refused to listen. Despite their warnings, Jack felt confident and bold. He had faced many challenges in his life and had never backed down from a challenge. He was determined to explore the garden and see what was inside, no matter what the villagers said. The villagers tried to stop him, but Jack was resolute. He promised to be careful and not to stay too long, but he was determined to see the garden for himself. The villagers reluctantly agreed, but warned Jack that if he did not return within the day, they would assume the worst and take action to protect their village. With a final warning from the villagers ringing in his ears, Jack entered the garden, eager to explore its secrets. The villagers watched him go, hoping that he would return unharmed, but fearing the worst. Despite their warnings, Jack was confident and undeterred. He was determined to uncover the truth about the garden and its mysterious past. With a sense of determination, Jack began his ascent up the wall, determined to see what lay within the mysterious garden. He climbed carefully, using the cracks and crevices in the stone to gain a foothold. He was determined to succeed, and his resolve only grew stronger as he climbed higher. Finally, he reached the top of the wall and looked down into the garden. What he saw was unlike anything he had ever seen before. The garden was a lush and verdant paradise, filled with exotic plants, blooming flowers, and flitting butterflies. The colors were vibrant and the air was filled with the sweet fragrance of the blooms. Jack was enchanted by the beauty of the garden and couldn't wait to explore it. He climbed down into the garden, eager to see what secrets it held. As he walked deeper into the garden, he felt a sense of wonder and awe. The plants and flowers seemed to glow with an inner light, and the sound of the birds and insects was like music to his ears. Despite the warnings from the villagers, Jack felt safe and at peace, as if he had found a hidden haven. He wandered through the garden, marveling at its beauty and marveling at the strange aura that surrounded it. He couldn't help but feel that there was more to the garden than met the eye, and he was determined to find out what it was. With a sense of excitement, Jack explored the garden, eager to uncover its secrets and solve its mysteries. He had no idea what he was about to find, but he was determined to find out. As Jack walked deeper into the garden, he suddenly heard a voice. It was soft and melodious, and it seemed to be calling to him from the depths of the garden. Jack was both intrigued and a little afraid. He had heard the warnings from the villagers about the garden and its secrets, and he was not sure what he was about to encounter. He followed the sound of the voice, walking deeper into the garden and through a stand of tall trees. Finally, he emerged into a clearing, and there she was, Sarah, the beautiful and mysterious woman who lived in the village. She was sitting on a stone bench, surrounded by a profusion of blooming flowers, and she was looking directly at Jack. Her eyes were deep and wise, and they seemed to see right through him. She beckoned him to come closer, and Jack approached her hesitantly, not sure what to expect. "Welcome, young traveler," Sarah said, her voice soft and musical. "I have been expecting you. I am Sarah, the keeper of this garden, and I have something to show you." Jack was both fascinated and intimidated by Sarah. He had heard stories about her, of course, but he had never met her in person. She was even more beautiful and mysterious than he had imagined, and he couldn't help but be drawn to her. Sarah stood up and took Jack's hand, leading him deeper into the garden. As they walked, she told him the story of the garden, of how it had been created and why it was so special. Jack listened intently, eager to learn more about this mysterious place and the woman who had created it. Finally, they came to a small pond in the center of the garden. Sarah gestured for Jack to look into the pond, and he peered into the still water. What he saw there was unlike anything he had ever seen before. He saw visions of the past, present, and future, and he saw glimpses of his own life and the lives of others. "You have been chosen, Jack," Sarah said. "You have been chosen to be the keeper of this garden and to protect its secrets. You have been chosen to continue the work that I have started, to keep this garden alive and to ensure that its magic is never lost." Jack was stunned. He had never expected this, and he was not sure that he was ready for such a responsibility. But Sarah was confident, and she promised to teach him everything he needed to know to become the keeper of the garden. With a sense of wonder and awe, Jack accepted the task that Sarah had given him, eager to learn more about the secrets of the garden and to carry on the legacy of its keeper. He would become the next keeper of the garden, and he would ensure that its magic was never lost. Sarah told Jack that the garden was her secret and that no one was allowed to enter. Jack pleaded with Sarah to let him stay for just a little while, and she finally agreed. As he spent more time in the garden, he discovered that it was not just a garden, but a portal to another world. Sarah was a witch, and the plants in the garden were magical. She had the power to control time and space and used the garden as a gateway to travel between worlds. Jack was amazed by what he was learning. He had never heard of such magic before, and he was fascinated by Sarah's powers. She showed him how the garden worked, how the plants grew and changed with her commands, and how she used the garden to travel between worlds. As Jack learned more about the magic of the garden, he also learned about the responsibilities that came with it. Sarah told him that the garden was more than just a place. It was a living entity, and it had to be protected at all costs. The magic of the garden was powerful and dangerous, and it could not fall into the wrong hands. "The garden is not just a garden, Jack," Sarah said. "It is a place of magic, and it is my life's work. I have dedicated my life to its protection, and now I am passing that responsibility on to you. You must protect this garden and its secrets, and you must use its magic wisely." Jack nodded, taking Sarah's words to heart. He was determined to protect the garden, and he was eager to learn more about its magic. He spent the next several months learning from Sarah, studying the plants and flowers, and mastering the skills that he would need to become the next keeper of the garden. As he grew stronger and more confident, he began to understand the true power of the garden. He realized that the magic was not just in the plants, but in the very soil and air. He learned how to control the elements and to use the magic to travel between worlds. He learned how to protect the garden and to keep its secrets safe. Finally, the day came when Sarah was ready to pass the mantle of the keeper of the garden to Jack. She stood before him, her eyes shining with pride, and she handed him a small seed. "Take this seed, Jack," she said. "Plant it in the garden, and it will grow into a new plant that will show you the way. The garden is yours now, and you are its keeper. Use its magic wisely and protect it always." And with that, Jack took the seed and planted it in the garden. He watched as it grew into a beautiful flower, and he felt the magic of the garden coursing through his veins. He knew that he was ready to take on the responsibility of the keeper of the garden, and he was eager to continue Sarah's life's work. From that day on, Jack was known as the keeper of the garden, and he continued to protect its secrets and to use its magic wisely. The garden flourished under his care, and he became known as a wise and powerful wizard, respected and admired by all who knew him. And so the story of the garden and its keeper was passed down from generation to generation, becoming a legend that would endure for centuries to come. Jack was amazed and couldn't believe his luck. He asked Sarah to teach him magic, and she agreed. But there was a catch. Sarah would only teach Jack magic if he agreed to take a vow of secrecy and never reveal the existence of the garden or her powers to anyone. Jack agreed to the terms, and Sarah began to teach him the ways of magic. Sarah was a strict but fair teacher, and Jack worked hard to learn the spells and incantations. He was fascinated by the magic of the garden and soon became an accomplished wizard. Jack and Sarah became close friends, and she would often tell him stories of her travels to other worlds. Years passed, and Jack became known as the most powerful wizard in the land. People would come from far and wide to seek his advice and guidance. But Jack never forgot his vow of secrecy, and he kept the existence of the garden and Sarah's powers a closely guarded secret. She taught him how to harness the power of the plants and how to use their magic for good. Jack learned how to control time and space, how to heal the sick, and how to create illusions. He was fascinated by the magic of the garden, and he spent hours every day studying and practicing the spells and incantations. Sarah was a strict but fair teacher, and Jack worked hard to learn everything she had to teach him. He was fascinated by the magic of the garden and soon became an accomplished wizard. Jack and Sarah became close friends, and she would often tell him stories of her travels to other worlds. Years passed, and Jack became known as the most powerful wizard in the land. People would come from far and wide to seek his advice and guidance. But Jack never forgot his vow of secrecy, and he kept the existence of the garden and Sarah's powers a closely guarded secret. They visited kingdoms ruled by wise and fair rulers, where magic was used for the betterment of all. They also encountered dark and dangerous places, where evil wizards and creatures threatened to destroy the balance of the world. Jack saw firsthand the impact that magic could have on the world, both positive and negative. Sarah warned him about the dangers of using magic for selfish or evil purposes, and she taught him the importance of using his powers for good. During their journey, Jack also learned about the history of magic and the origins of the garden. He discovered that the garden was a rare and powerful source of magic, and that Sarah was one of the few remaining guardians of its power. When Jack and Sarah returned to the village, Jack was a changed man. He had a new understanding of the magic of the garden and the responsibility that came with wielding its power. He continued to use his magic for good and to help those in need, but he never forgot the lessons he learned in the other world. With Sarah's blessing, Jack left the village and set out on his own to use his magic to help others. He journeyed far and wide, facing many challenges along the way, but he never wavered in his mission to use his powers for good. People began to hear about the young man with magic, and they sought him out for help. Jack used his powers to heal the sick, protect the vulnerable, and bring justice to the oppressed. He quickly gained a reputation as a hero and a defender of the people. But Jack also drew the attention of those who sought to use magic for evil. He was challenged by powerful wizards, dark creatures, and even demons, but he never backed down. With his bravery and his mastery of magic, he always emerged victorious. Years passed, and Jack became known as the greatest wizard in the land. People looked up to him as a leader, and he continued to use his powers for the good of all. He never forgot the lessons he learned from Sarah and the journey to the other world, and he continued to share his knowledge and his powers with others. Jack returned to his world, but he was changed forever. He kept Sarah's warning and never spoke of his experiences in the other world or his powers as a wizard. However, the knowledge and experience he gained from his journey stayed with him, and he continued to use it to make the world a better place. He lived a quiet life, always ready to use his magic to help those in need, but never drawing attention to himself. Years went by, and Jack grew old. He passed on his knowledge and powers to a young wizard, who he believed would use them for good. He disappeared from the public eye, and many people wondered what had happened to the great wizard. However, those who knew the truth whispered among themselves that Jack had returned to the other world through the portal in Sarah's garden. They said that he had gone back to continue his journey, to explore the wonders of the magic world, and to share his knowledge with future generations of wizards. And so, the legend of Jack, the greatest wizard, lived on, and the secret of Sarah's garden was passed down from generation to generation, a reminder of the magic that exists in our world.